welcome to 1 Corinthians 12. Now, this is pretty interesting. Spiritual gifts. First thing Paul says, I don't want you to be ignorant. That means I don't want you to not know. We're going to do a lot of definition looking up, lack of knowledge. Gentiles means non-Jews. Carried away by dumb idols. Dumb, I believe that means they don't speak. Yes. Mute, silent. So somehow you're led away by something that can't even speak. Therefore I make known to you that no one speaking by the Spirit of God, calls Jesus accursed. The word accursed means anathema. That's interesting. Let's look up this one here. Excommunicated, anathema, curse. I actually don't know what anathema means. Look, that's actually the root word. Interesting. Let's look up anathema quickly. Yeah, so I think excommunicated or denouncing a doctrine. Interesting. Okay, so I always just read this as accursed. I'm quite familiar with accursed, but anyway. No one can say that Jesus is Lord except by the Holy Spirit. That's interesting. Yeah, we'll leave that for now. There are diversities of gifts, but the same Spirit. Again, one love, one Spirit, etc. There are diversities of ministries, but the same Lord. So there's some people that like to go into the slums. There's some people that like to just preach in church. Some people that like to go to other countries and do mission work, etc., etc. Some people like to teach. Some people like to evangelize. Part of what I was just saying falls in this category too. But the same God who works all in all. Why is there a footnote there? All things. So I think it means all things in all. The reason why I'm going back and forth here, pass. I don't know why there's one footnote and there's two words. I guess because it's the same word, they didn't want to have two definitions. It just means all in all. The manifestation of the Spirit is given to each one for the profit of all. So the first thing we learn is that the gifts of the Spirit are for our benefit. Not just a single person's benefit, but the group benefit. Which includes the edification of individuals too. So we'll get to some later that are more for the edification of you. But if you're edified, then you can then bless other people, and it's still for the benefit of all people. Or of all, at least the church, but I think it's all, because it just says all, not the church. And yeah, also if you're strong, then you can help whoever you come into contact with, right? So now we're going to go through different spiritual gifts here. Word of wisdom through the Spirit. So a spirit doesn't normally speak in an audible voice. It's a spiritual knowing, a spiritual understanding of wisdom. So sometimes you might just know something. The most common example that I think happens, this is going to apply to some of the other gifts too, but the most common spiritual gift, we will see later that gifts operate by love. So if you're caring about someone, and the most common one I think is when two friends are just talking and one's trying to help the other one, right? So sometimes your friend always just tends to give you good advice, right? Some of that is spiritual gifts. God doesn't need the person to be aware. If the person cares about someone else and God sees fit to give that person some spiritual insight, they might not even know about it. It just comes to their spirit. They don't even understand that this is happening. They give the person really good advice. The person feels better. Everyone's happy. There's profit there, right? Word of knowledge is the same thing. Wisdom, slightly different than knowledge. Knowledge is just knowing something. Wisdom is more understanding. Um, Faith, sometimes you just have supernatural faith come to your spirit, and we all have times where we have doubts, mostly in our head, I think, rather than in our heart. But um, there's a gift of faith where you just, for some reason, believe in something very strongly, and that's the gift of faith. Gifts of healings, it's pretty self-explanatory. Working of miracles, this one's mostly a ministry gift, I believe. Like, you see this a lot during crusades, and like mass, like when people are preaching in Africa, and God just sees there's thousands of people here, and wants to give a strong witness. It happened in the Book of Acts too. We went over that in one of the first videos. So that's not, usually it's bearing witness to the word of his grace, which is similar to the gospel of grace, right? So the gospel, grace, generally this is in that context. Obviously God's not restrained to that, but saw a lot in the Old Testament too, with like Moses and that. But in New Testament context, it's generally related to the gospel. Prophecy, which is seeing things that other people don't see, seeing things in the spirit, being able to predict things. Discerning of spirits is being able to discern or like tell, divide, figure out the spirit that someone is operating in someone else. So you might meet someone and you're unsure about them, and you'll get a unpeaceful feeling in your heart. That's kind of like dogs are very good at this, actually. Interesting enough, because dogs are our helpers in a way too. So I think even you could say it's instinct. I don't know for sure if it's God or instinct, but if it's instinct, God put the instinct there anyway. So regardless, I don't know if you've ever seen a dog that just starts barking at certain people. They're discerning the spirit of that person. Excuse me. Now, different kinds of tongues. This one is a bit, it's probably the most, or the least accepted, the most controversial, and interpretation of tongues. Sorry, I'm getting slightly nervous talking about this because a lot of people don't like it, but it is what it is. So, this means different languages. I'll talk about this more later. And the same Spirit works all these things, distributing, to each one individually as he wills, as the Spirit wills. Now, as the body is one and has many members, one love again. But all the members of that one body, being many, are one body, so also is Christ. For by one Spirit we were all baptized into one body, one love, whether Greeks or Jews, whether slaves or free, and we have all made to drink into the one Spirit. For in fact, the body is not one member, but many. If the foot shall say, etc., I'm not going to read this. This is just talking about the difference between body and different parts and all that. You can read through that if you want. It's pretty self-explanatory. Yeah, so this is important, I think. So it's talking about not despising other people's role in the body. So probably a more commonly despised one would be like things that aren't seen as like I want to say glory, but it's not really glory. It's just things that aren't like a janitor, a cook, like everyday things, but often those are the most important. People look down on them, but basically, an eye won't say to a hand, "I don't need you," right? Or a head to the feet. All the members of the body are important. Um, that's what he's talking about. Less honorable. That's the word I was looking for. Schism, interesting. H. Division. That means division. There should be no division in the body. So all the parts of the body should work together towards the same goal, basically. Towards like operating healthy body operating together. So like if like it would look weird if my hand was doing one thing and my head was doing another thing and my foot was doing another thing. They're all going in opposite directions. Sometimes that's what the church does when it shouldn't be. So basically saying, if one member suffers, we should suffer together. If one member is honored, we should rejoice. So this is interesting because there's a lot of jealousy where if one person is doing really good in the church or is whatever, there's miracles happening or whatever, rather than get jealous in that, should be rejoicing together. Excuse me, sorry. God has appointed these in the church: apostles, prophets, teachers, miracles, gifts of healings, helps, administrations, variety of tongues. We're not all those things. They're different parts of the body. Sometimes I think apostles generally can operate in all of them, but so I'm actually going to continue because at the end of this, where Paul's talking about all this is important, but I don't want to stress it as much as the next part. Earnestly desire the best gifts. Best means, is that I? Greater. So I think by greater, he's talking about prophets, teachers. I think it goes greatest to least, but, or no, sorry, right here. I don't even know. I think greatest to least here. But even so, they're all important, like he was just saying, and I'll get more into tongues again after, but I'm going to continue going because I don't like how this was cut off. Paul's saying at the very end, I'll show you a more excellent way. And then where does he go after that? The most famous verse or chapter on love, I believe. Or not the most famous, but it's up there. I think it's probably, it might be the most famous. But anyways, so he's saying, because the Corinthians actually had a lot of these gifts operating in their church, and they were aware of it, and but they were lacking love. So Paul's saying, though I have the gift of prophecy and understand mysteries, have all knowledge, all faith, can move mountains, but I don't have love, I'm nothing. Then he talks about what love is. I don't feel the need to repeat this because everyone, you can read it if you want, but it's preached all the time. It's one of the most common things at a wedding for the minister to share. So ends with abide in faith, hope, and love, but the greatest of these is love. So I'm gonna save tongues for I think the next one, chapter 14. But what this is talking about is that through desiring the gifts, an excellent way to operate in the gifts and operate in a healthy way, operate the gifts in a healthy way, so that everyone profits, is for love to be at the forefront rather than fame, glory, like miracles and healings of that. Like a lot of people can start to claim glory for themselves and look what God did, etc., or look what I did instead of what God actually did. So that's pretty important. I'm gonna end it here, and thank you for listening.